A compact but powerful storm system is crossing across the eastern US over this weekend, and it's going to be bringing a lot of rain and storms. All along the East Coast, we're expecting some pretty heavy rain for the next 3 days straight. Within the mix, we have some severe weather concerns, we have some flood concerns, but we also just have a pretty wet weekend for y'all that we'll be tracking today. We're looking a little bit further long term. We have a new area of severe weather across the northern plains we're tracking on Monday, and then we'll be taking a look at the longer term weather pattern, including some intense heat that'll be continuing on as we get started with August, but also some cooler air, some nice relief that'll be coming for portions of the north. Today is Saturday, August 1st. We're starting a new month, but there's still a lot of weather to get to, so let's dive into everything you need to know today in the weather world. Alright, so there are a few things of note on our weather pattern that I want to keep track of this week. The first thing is this area of low pressure over portions of the Midwest. You can pretty clearly see this swirl right to the southwest of Chicago. This is associated with a broader trough that's going to be moving to the east over the next few days. So this is going to bring a lot of stormy weather ahead to the eastern US with just a broad trough of low pressure. Embedded within those storms, we do have at least some severe weather risks, some flood risks. We'll break all those down in a second. After that storm system passes on to the east, though, the jet stream is going to shift to the north as we have a pretty strong area of high pressure built to the south. So this is going to shift most of the activity, most of the storms further to the north, while keeping the rest of the southern US hot and dry. And this pattern is going to take us through the first week of August and should lead to somewhat of a quieter weather pattern, especially if you're in the south. Definitely the north, though, that's what we're going to be focusing on later next week for the potential future rounds of severe storms. So there are a lot of different moving parts to track, but let's actually start with the fire weather risk because this is very significant across portions of the northwestern US. We have elevated in orange, but especially this critical fire danger in red to extremely critical fire danger in pink. This is a portion of Washington and northern Oregon. This is where weather conditions are very conducive for rapid spread of any fires that starts. This pink shade, that's level 3 out of 3. That's the highest fire weather risk there is. And we actually also have particularly dangerous situation red flag warnings in place for this region. So the environment is very prime where any fire that sparks, it could very rapidly spread, be erratic in motion, and be very hard to control. So we all want to do our part to not accidentally cause any fires, no burning. Tomorrow the threat shifts a little bit further to the east over Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, so many of the mountainous regions. We still have a lot of dry air and a lot of very gusty winds in place. On a bit of a different note, let's look at severe weather over the next few days, and our severe weather risks are really going to follow that area of low pressure I pointed out on the weather pattern map earlier as it moves further to the east. So today we have a slight risk to marginal risk of severe weather really from the Kentucky to Tennessee Valley. So this includes Knoxville, Louisville, Huntsville, all the way down into Alabama. As our surface low pressure crosses, we have a cold front that will be extending south, and as it collides with some warmer air, we could have a few stronger storms in the mix. There's also a marginal risk for a few strong storms over mainly New Mexico, with some of the summer monsoon bringing some thunderstorms with maybe some gusty winds. There is somewhat of a tornado risk, especially a little bit further north in that slight risk threat. So from Cincinnati to parts of Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee, a few tornadoes can't be ruled out. Damaging winds, though, is definitely the more likely and the bigger threat with this system. Tomorrow, we can see the severe weather risk shift further to the east once again as our storm shifts to the east. So now encompassing a much broader region from the Ohio Valley down into the Carolinas, including Cleveland, Atlanta, just brushing up against Washington, D.C. A few strong storms. Marginal risk, this is a pretty low threat. We definitely don't want to discount the risk just because it's low. We also have a marginal risk in portions of North Dakota. On top of the severe risk, the flood risk is actually going to be pretty significant. We just have a lot of rain moving into the eastern US. So all the way from Chicago down to Florida, we have a pretty large slight risk to marginal risk of flooding. If you're in any of these zones, know that we do expect some heavy rain possible, and that could be enough to cause some flooding concerns. We also have a pocket of flooding concerns from Texas into New Mexico with that monsoon. Tomorrow, the threat all shifts a little bit further to the east as our low pressure shifts further to the east. So now we're talking about all along the Atlantic seaboard from Florida up to New York and Vermont. Now, in particular, we have a slightly higher concern where some more localized higher flooding could occur near the Great Lakes, so upstate New York and Pennsylvania and northern Ohio, and then also a threat across Florida where we have some more tropical moisture in play. Even on Monday, though, we still have a broad flood risk across the East Coast, maybe a little bit more concentrated across the populated urban centers near New York. So on top of the severe threat, the flood threat is pretty significant over the next few days. So let's track everything out. One thing I want to point out is we have our lines of equal pressure up higher in the atmosphere. This is at 500 millibars, and we can pretty clearly see our area of low pressure and just a broad troughiness in the jet stream, the dip in the jet stream that's bringing a lot of our energy and moisture. So the center of the low pressure will be swirling around Illinois and Indiana, but swirling around that on the outside, this is where more of the rain will be. So we have some numerous showers and storms in somewhat of a line all the way down from Mississippi, Alabama, up into Ohio. All this will be moving to the east, and that's going to be the gradual trend each day. But before it does so, some of these storms could definitely be on the stronger side. Remember remember, we do have that slight risk of severe weather, so some of these storms here could contain some gusty winds. That isolated tornado threat also does exist a little bit further to the north. We also want to remember the flood threat. In particular, across Indiana, northern Ohio, southern Michigan, there could be a corridor of slightly more sustained rain develop overnight and into tomorrow morning. Notice that this model is bringing a lot of rain over the same areas for many hours on end, so this could locally enhance the flood threat here and is definitely something we want to be paying attention to. Now for tomorrow, it's just going to be a very wet day all across the East Coast. We'll keep the model very broad, but you can see all the rain just from Pennsylvania down to the Carolinas, down even to Florida, just some more rain. So if you're doing any traveling or if you live along the East Coast, I would expect a very soggy day at times with some of these rounds of showers and storms. And we have that broad brush marginal risk of severe weather, but we can't rule out a few stronger wind gusts here or there, but nothing too concerning. But remember the flash flood threat for tomorrow, there's a slightly higher corridor in interior New England near the Great Lakes, and this is because we can see some of this heavy rain here training over the same areas, so this could definitely bring some quick flooding if we get some torrential downpours. Florida, that's the other area. We have a lot of tropical moisture down here that will be moving in, so the Panhandle, the Big Bend of Florida, up toward Gainesville, Jacksonville, some rounds of heavy rain could also promote some flooding concerns that we'll be watching very closely. So this is today and tomorrow. Unfortunately, it'll definitely be pretty wet for some of your weekend plans, but hopefully we'll get some cooler air in and some slight relief in the summertime. As we go further on Monday, everything will be shifting off the coast, but we still have this broad troughiness, so a few scattered showers and storms still can't be ruled out. Definitely not as organized though on Monday than it was today and on Sunday. So that's the next 2 days with our storm system that'll be exiting off the East Coast. After that though, our attention will shift a little bit further to the north, back to the northern plains. We actually have a day 3 slight risk of severe weather as of this recording across Minnesota, portions of the Dakotas, with the marginal risk extending all the way down into Nebraska. So this is definitely the next highlighted area of severe weather. We can see through the day on Monday, a pretty messy day, but definitely some opportunities for some storms and showers. This is a little bit further out on the models, so a little bit more uncertainty as to how this evolves, but we could have a decently substantial severe weather threat up here. Definitely consider this an early heads up and check back in the forecast over the next few days for the latest updates. Large hail and damaging winds though would be the main concern. Again, this is for on Monday. So you can see where the rainfall is going to be playing out over the next few days. We have all this rain over the eastern US. This is associated with just that broad trough of low pressure. So from Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, it's just going to be wet over this weekend and into Monday. So prepare for some of that. We also have some wet weather across the northern plains with some of those stronger storms possible on Monday. And then some more activity might extend a little bit into the central plains as well. But some of the hotspots for flooding that we're tracking in some of those slightly higher flood risks is that area across Florida, especially western Florida. This is where we could get some pretty significant rainfall totals, possibly greater than 6 inches. The other corridor that's under the slightly more elevated flood threat is along the Great Lakes, where we could get some 2 to 4 inch rainfall totals. And then for today, also across central Indiana, we could get some heavier rainfall. Also notice the areas that are not getting rain. We have a rain hole over the southern plains, so Texas, Oklahoma, the Arklatex region, and also much of the western US. If you're west of the monsoon, high pressure is going to be in charge. It's going to be hot, it's going to be dry. This is also what's promoting a lot of that fire concern we were tracking earlier in the northwest. So with that said, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's track the heat now over the next few days, because with some of the rain, we also have some cooler air that'll be filtering in. Not just rain cold air, but technically a weak cold front moving through much of the eastern US. So it's going to really reduce the heat risk for the next few days. If you're in the yellow shade, it'll still be warm. It just won't be normal summertime heat. Notice how most of the heat risk is off to the western US and then the southern US for today. Going over the next few days, the trend will continue where the heat risk will be reduced. Some spots in the northern plains, we might not even have any heat risk, which is pretty nice for summer, while all of the heat dangers is in the southwest, where we're under the orange, moderate, red, major, purple, extreme. This is really going to continue through much of the next week. You can see as I click through day by day, the same areas that are hot will stay hot, and some of the same areas that are getting a nice break from summer, getting some cooler air, you'll stay cool for a little bit, so that'll be nice for y'all. We're definitely hoping for some of that cooler air down in the south though. By the time we go to the end of the week, the heat will start spreading and expanding across the southern US as high pressure starts expanding, so that's something to watch if maybe we could get another heat wave setting up toward next weekend. So let's track what that actually looks like with temperatures. Now, some of the hottest spots all summer long and some of the hottest spots over the next week will be in the desert southwest. It's just been scorching here in this region for the past week. It's going to be very hot over the next few days. Temperatures well into the 110s, even as high as 120 degrees in some of the spots in the valleys and the deserts in that region. So you're used to the heat, but even this is hot for summer standards, and we definitely want to take this very seriously. Now, triple digits will likely extend across the southern plains all the way into Texas, but look further to the north. This is in combination with the rain as well as some cooler air with the trough. These are high temperatures on Mondays, highs in the 70s and 80s for a lot of us in the Midwest and the northern US, so that'll be nice. The next thing to point out is we will have a brief incursion of some slightly stronger cooler air moving in the far northern US as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday, so middle of the week. So this is Tuesday morning. We could have some lows across the mountains into the 40s and 50s, even the Dakotas. After that Monday severe weather threat clears to the east, we will have some cooler air coming in behind it, so it's going to feel pretty nice in the 50s. Highs across the northern plains could potentially be in the 60s across far northern Minnesota and North Dakota with widespread 70s. It's just going to feel very pleasant, especially with some of the drier air clearing out all the humidity in this region over the past few days. The rest of us, especially in the south, we're just going to be hot in the 90s. As I showed on the heat risk map, this trend will really continue through much of the week. Wednesday morning, we could still have widespread 50s for lows across the northern plains in the blue shade, high temperatures in the north and even across much of the east staying in the 70s, and then high temperatures in the south staying in the 90s to triple digits. As I mentioned, as we go into the end of the week, the heat from the south could expand back to the north and to the east, and maybe we're starting to talk about another heat wave as we get into next weekend and maybe the second week of August, but still a lot of details that are blurry at this time, and we'll definitely hone in a little bit as we get closer. So some nice relief for the north. Think kindly for all of the friends to the south, because we're going to be baking down here still with triple digits. In terms of rain chances, you can see on the extended model, this is all that rain from the storm today and tomorrow that will be clearing. You have some of that activity in the northern plains with that severe weather risk on Monday. Now going a little bit further past then, it does become pretty fuzzy in our models where the next big storm tracks, but as I mentioned at the beginning of the video with that jet stream in the north, that's generally going to be where the focus for some storms are. So the strongest thunderstorms across the north, maybe we could have some more strong storms across Wisconsin and Michigan on Wednesday, Thursday, and then as we go into the later week, maybe some more activity redeveloping across the plains for next weekend. But all of this is really kind of fuzzy and in the air, so this definitely catches my attention, some of this activity moving through the Midwest middle of the week. This could be our next severe weather threat after Monday, but we don't have enough confidence for concrete details. Still a lot more updates, of course, as we get closer. The good news is there doesn't look to be any big dramatic storm system swinging through anytime in the next week. And that's all that's happening in the weather world. So nothing too dramatic, but definitely some areas of severe weather, some flood concerns over the next few days, and then just that broad heat dome continuing in the south while the north gets a little bit of some cooler air later on this week. Thanks so much for watching. If you never want to miss any updates in the weather world, especially as we slowly start closing out on summer, we're approaching fall, definitely consider subscribing because I'll always be keeping track on the latest. Otherwise, hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.